Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to jump right into a general care for your phal, your moth orchid, that orchid that you might have bought in Trader Joe's, in Home Depot, a big box department store orchid, or even a novelty Phalaenopsis, which I'll explain which those are. You may have found a smaller orchid which has a different type of shape of flower, even a fragrance, but we'll get into that. And to create an overall general outline, we're going to get into those four factors that I touched on the last video about Paphiopedilums, but of course they're applicable for all orchids. That's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be light, water, temperature, and humidity. Now, these four factors are sort of what make a beginner orchid a beginner orchid. So that first orchid you buy or the orchid that's in immediate care is going to have a lot of easy ways to deal with these four factors. Now, regardless if your orchid is a beginner, when we're talking about phals, your Phalaenopsis orchids, there are three things. I know with Paphiopedilums we talked about the roots and the crown, but with Phalaenopsis we're going to include that one more thing, and that's the leaves. Now, the roots, of course, we know vital. The crown, that part of the leaves where they grow out of, you don't want to water, is vital. But the leaves themselves, which differ from Paphiopedilums, are a bit more succulent. The leaves actually hold water. When these leaves are dying, we want to make sure we have a lot more leaves. Paphiopedilum leaves are a lot more thinner. They don't store as much water. The roots are a lot more dependent when it comes to paths, but with phals, we want to make sure that we're taking good care of the leaves. They're a lot more fleshy and again succulent, so we want to make sure their appearance is well, and they're basically telling us how the orchid is going. Now, to jump into the first factor, which kind of has to do with the leaves, we have light. Now, as a general rule of thumb, you'll hear that orchids are low light orchids, throw them under a desk light, low light this, low light that. That's great. Also, your definition of the light levels depends. But in all honesty, with all orchids, you at least want to have them in some type of medium light or bright light, just not in some sort of indirect light or somewhere where they're close to heat, where they're overheat. Because again, they will tolerate the low light, but they won't thrive. And we want our orchids to thrive, and that thriving is going to come from the application of a bit of a higher medium light, which is basically a bright light, like a bright room, when you have a sunny day, but without that direct heat shining on you, or a sunny room, I should say, without the intense heat hitting you. The only difference in the segue between having your light intensity low to high really comes between the standard and the novelties. The novelties can, in all honesty, stand a bit more intense light, but if you want to be safe, just put everything in a medium light. Grow them in a highlight room. Grow them under LEDs. LEDs don't produce any type of heat. The small amount of heat that they don't produce won't affect the blooms, which is why you can see I grow all my plants under LEDs, mainly because they're very far away from a window, but that's environmentally specific. As you know, many people do grow their orchids right in the window. Now, as opposed to the novelties, which can take a highlight, your standard Phalaenopsis, or the ones that you can buy in your big box department stores, Home Depot, even Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, these type of orchids can take a low light. They may even bloom for you in low light, but it's best to just have them in a high light, a bright light, just without all that heat and intensity. Of course, this highlight is very, very much recommended to bloom. Now, When it comes to phals, they do indicate with regard to highlight when you're giving them too much light with regard to burning. Now, the capacity when you know you're giving your phal enough light is when the leaves get that reddish appearance. So that means that you're at a capacity. You shouldn't go any further than there. It's actually not a negative thing. It's almost like the plant's melanin or way of tanning so that it can cope with that higher light. You can have a full red leaf. In certain instances, in certain situations, you'll have a full red leaf over the green appearance that you're used to seeing. It's not a negative thing, but if you push it past that, if you increase that light, if you increase even, let's say, the duration in some rare instances, but mainly if you increase that heat or increase the intensity past that redness, that's when you're giving your orchid too much light. And of course, again, as I've said time and time again, the heat is a real indicator. You can touch your orchids. I always touch my orchids even though they're under the LEDs just to see. For the most part, my orchids are primarily cool to the touch. I don't grow in windows. I did try in windows, and most of my orchids were very warm, and I just didn't want to go through the challenge of having to monitor them on this minute scale, daily, hourly, by the minute. I didn't want to move in that direction, and most of us don't. Not that we're lazy, but we want to have some sort of balanced regimen where we're not doing one thing out of control, especially these factors when it comes to providing light or water, just factors when it comes to growing. And when it comes to providing this light and seeing the anthocyanin, which will create the redness, some of the Phalaenopsis, especially the novelties, will be prone to getting paler leaves. But again, feel the temperature of the leaves. If it's cool, it's cool, it's fine. If it's warm, we're probably entering a danger zone. But that's also where you can get into playing with your humidity and your airflow to counteract that. But that's a video for a different time or even a different person, because I don't have super high temperatures where I demand a higher humidity, because that's what's required with very, very high temperatures. The windows, I don't grow in a window, but I can recommend a southern window. All my windows face south, but I don't have ledges big enough to accommodate my plants. But southern windows do provide a very, very bright light. In some instances, you may have to provide some type of shading in order to counteract the heat that comes along with the bright light. But southern window is very recommended. That's basically the answer to that saying when people say sunlight but indirect, or bright but indirect. So you want a bright area, but you don't want the intensity. Along with temperature, orchids, if you're okay with how you feel in a room, then the orchid is okay. So if the temperature is okay with you, it's okay with your orchid, generally speaking. If you can feel intensity, your orchids can feel intensity. And lastly, with light, because I don't want to get too involved, I'm going to leave you at 12 hours. You want to leave your orchids at 12 hours as a minimum, or just grow them in your window where they'll have the cycle of maybe even going as low as 10 hours at some times. But during that grow season in the summer, they'll get the light and adequate amount of time that they need to produce that light into the energy for the blooms. And next, for phals, we'll jump into the watering. I know I talked about watering in a couple of videos. I'm pretty new to this, so I'll place a couple of links down below in prior videos where it's a little more specific. But with regard to watering your your Phalaenopsis, you want to water when those roots are gray. The roots, when they're watered, will have a green appearance, and when they're thirsty, will have a gray, silvery at times appearance. Now, the only slight difference between, I was talking about the standards that you buy, in the department stores versus the novelty specialty orchids. The standards, you'll want to water when they're completely dry, when that pot is at a bone dry, when it's light. Again, when it comes to watering, you want to know what the weight of your pot feels like, because the inside of the pot may be hard to gauge. But when that pot is light and those roots are gray, are silver, a great indicator on your phal, it's time to water. If they're green, don't water. They're hydrated. Now, with regard to the novelty Phalaenopsis, even some of the species, you want to look for that silver tinge, but you'll notice that the grayness will appear when the orchid is sort of dry, approaching the dryness. These phals don't like to dry out because, again, they're closely related to their species parents, whether it's a direct cross, a primary hybrid, a complex hybrid, a standard hybrid, as I like to call them, that may be crossed with the novelty. Appearance says everything. How the roots appear when the pot is completely dry, as opposed to when the pot is almost approaching dryness. These things are indicators on how you should basically water. And the seasons are going to come into a lot of factor here. So you water more when it's warm, less when it's cool. Here again in the States, it's warmer generally between February and October, cooler between October and February. And then in between that, you want to throw in your fertilizing. So some people, they say that they get away with not fertilizing, and I do believe that it's because a lot of Phalaenopsis are just hybridized over a lot of time to just deal with the factors that they have. Additionally, this organic medium that we grow in, I don't grow in any inorganic, but organic medium has breakdown processes which can provide minute traces of fertilization to the orchid over time. So generally when it comes to fertilization, it's always good, as people say, to fertilize weekly. For me, during the warmer months, I do fertilize every other watering at a very weak dosage. In the cooler months, I fertilize only once a week, no matter what the watering frequency is. Pardon me. And that dosage can range between a fourth of a dose, between a half of a dose. And a half for me is for the smaller pots, 4 inches and under, and a half of a dose. Excuse me, I'm not sure what I just said, but a fourth of a dose, 4 inches and under, and a half of a dose is going to be 4.5 and under. 4.5 tends to be, to me, appearance-wise, very close to 5 inches. So for these larger pots, you want to not only water more, but give them a little more, slight more fertilization. At least that's what I notice, especially in these intermediate climates where you have warmer situations more than not. And lastly, with phals, make sure with your watering that you're keeping up with your flushing. I fertilize once a month all year round, no matter with the phals, because they're heavy feeders. So I only flush the pot once a month with that pure water, with my zero filter, or even just running tap water straight through the pot at a good speed. What you want to make sure is that there's no water sitting, basically, and try to dissolve anything that might be left in the pot. When it comes to specific watering, specifically flushing, I do add in every once in a while Physan for that antibacterial, or magnesium to help flush out additional salts that are left from the fertilizer. But that's for a different video, specifically for Phalaenopsis. Generally, you just want to make sure you flush in tandem with your fertilizing for phals, but you can really only do it once a month, depending on what your dosage of fertilizer is. A lot of times, especially growing organically, the pot will tell you when it's over fertilized, especially with the appearance of the white residue on the bark. Those are salts. You don't want the roots to come into contact with that if it's not moist. So it's not necessarily common sense, but there's some logic that can, come into this, especially with phals, especially on the basis of looking at it and just trying to figure out what your plant needs. Now, jumping on to temperature, uh, most phals, as a rule of thumb, unless you're getting into some type of specific species, most phals are going to be intermediate to warm, which makes them very easy, which is why there are a lot of people's beginner orchids. They grow excellent in a home. I mean, just look at them. They grow great. I mean, I do have some heat mats, but that's really for the bottom roots in the root area. But I mean, Phalaenopsis are perfect for growing in the homes because, again, if you feel good, they feel good. Now, if you don't feel good in your home and there's things you have to work on, you probably don't want to buy plants. You probably shouldn't be buying plants. But if you feel good in your home and the temperature's great, it's good for the plants. I mean, an intermediate temperature, 75 degrees with a fluctuation a little above and below. It'll be a little more drastic during the change of seasons, but you don't want to grow your plants in like 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Come on. Um, but yes, again, basically warm versus hot, cool versus warm and hot. And generally your novelties are going to require a bit more warmer temperatures, and your standard Phalaenopsis are going to require that intermediate temperature in between. So again, here in the States, what I'm familiar with, your grow season, when your plant grows those leaves and it gets the strong foliage, is going to be between February, aka Valentine's Day, and October, aka Halloween. Now approaching Halloween, that in between time, our transitional seasons, this season being fall, that's a critical blooming season, that cool down season, especially for your standard Phalaenopsis. That's when they're going to put out their flower spikes. So you want to make sure you open your windows at night. Maybe if you can, keep them closed during the day so you can make a big temperature variation as you can, because that drop is letting the orchid know that the season is changing. And I have a very, very good success with that, with just keeping my windows closed during the day and super open at night during the evenings. And that's something that I'm okay with. So again, your orchids are okay with something that we're okay with. And just like in my video with the paths, it's very similar that they're going to put out their spikes and they're going to bloom during this season, and during the next season you want to just repeat the process of getting the plant ready for that grow season. And we'll get into specifics because some people can continue their spikes growing, and some people cut the spikes, and some people can cut the spikes at a certain point to make sure that, or excuse me, not to make sure, but to provide an opportunity for the plant to extend from that point. Some people cut the spike completely for a stronger spike next. It's really, really all with preference. And there's a note that I did want to add here when it comes to your novelty and the warmer blooms. They'll basically bloom and grow when the temperatures are sort of above 73. That seems to be a sweet spot. 75 is the safest spot, but 73 seems to be a sweet spot for me. And if you keep it above that, your novelty will continue to bloom and grow. Your standard may just grow, put out that foliage, and you got to get the drop down to get them to bloom. There are some people that have a specific number, 8 to 10 degrees. I really don't monitor the number too much because it stresses me out. So I just make sure that I open my windows and that the night times are cooler, no matter what the season is. And lastly, I did mention that humidity is a factor to put in. You want to provide as much humidity to your orchids as possible, to your plants as possible, but it's not a necessity. I mean, if you're growing in zero humidity, you might want to take some drastic factors. I don't have humidity that low, so I don't. But humidity basically determines how fast your environment dries out. So again, that comes back to watering and how much you want to water your plants. Um, there are a couple of ways that you can increase your humidity with humidifiers that I have here going here in tandem with my fans to make sure the humidity is widespread and spread out. Here in my house, the humidity normally on average between 30 and 60. It kind of depends. It really depends on what's going on outside, because even with my windows open or closed, where our environments are infected, my goodness, are affected by what's going on outside in the actual climate that we live in. Aside from humidifiers, you can use humidity trays. I've seen people spray Spanish moss or even hang some damp towels. Personally, I don't recommend that because it just sounds like germs to me. I don't like physical things hanging around with fans. Smells and just weird. But yes, humidity is not necessarily a factor when it comes to these beginner orchids. In some other orchids that I don't really talk about, maybe Vandas might require a bit of a higher humidity, or some specific type of species or orchid that may be crossed with this particular species. But in general, keeping up with your watering should take care. You can also mist your plants. I do mist my plants when I'm bored. I only mist the leaves when the top media is dry. Most of the time, I just wait until that 4-day or 7-day cycle. I don't really play too much with humidity, but there is something to note with plants about humidity, and that's the stomatas, which is something, again, we'll talk about in the specifics of plants, because the phals have their stomatas open at night, and Paviopedilums have them open all day, and they're basically these breathing mechanisms at the bottom of the plants that are able to absorb the nutrients from light feedings, let's say. But because it's not a popular subject to talk about, I do have a lot of success with this, so I do touch on it in a foliar feeding video in my lineup. But because it's very weird with watering at night, it's something that I talk about specifically in the video. And with those factors of light, water, temperature, and humidity for your Phalaenopsis, I'll leave you with that. And don't be intimidated, because most of these factors are stuff that comes innate within our homes anyway. And just go ahead and get that first phal that you've been eyeing in the grocery store or online, and knock yourself out. Join the online community on YouTube, like I'm making my pitch to, and try to grow these babies as well as you can. Again, if you want to go ahead and follow me on social media, I do have a slew of photos of all the orchids in bloom, as well as the beautiful foliage. I love posts. I'm old-fashioned, so I run through my Facebook and Instagram with a slew of photos for people who don't enjoy the motion picture life. But yes, check me out there, or just stay tuned to this video. And lastly, like, subscribe, and leave those comments. I want to answer these questions in next videos. I want to provide updates. I want to get some criticism. Wow. I don't want to get some criticism, but I want to accept it. Give me your critiques. Let me know how it's going. I'm enjoying this, and I hope that you are too. Happy growing, guys.